Some scientists genuinely think ancient humans survived brutal winters by doing the exact same thing bears do: hibernating, like actually slowing their bodies down and sleeping through the worst of it. I need you to sit with that for a second because if true, that means somewhere in your family tree, an ancestor of yours chose nap for months as a legitimate survival strategy. And honestly, respect. And before you fully commit to the mental image of your ancestors just full on hibernating like a bear for 4 months straight, hold on. Because this is actually a genuinely controversial, still debated theory in paleoanthropology, and not everyone in the field agrees with it. So let's actually break down the real evidence, the real skepticism, and what ancient humans were doing for winter survival that we're actually confident about. Quick thing before we dive in. If you're new here, we cover ancient history and human origins like this every week, real research, zero boring textbook energy. Hit follow now so you don't miss the next one. So before we even get to the wild hibernation theory, it's worth knowing that ancient humans living through brutal Ice Age winters, especially Neanderthals, were genuinely built different on a biological level. Researchers have found that Neanderthal facial structure and body shape show clear adaptations to cold, high-energy demand environments. A stockier, more muscular build that retained heat more efficiently than a leaner frame would. And the calorie numbers involved are genuinely wild. Archaeologists estimate Neanderthals living in cold climates needed somewhere between 3,360 and 4,480 calories a day just to maintain their bodies and stay functional. For context, that's roughly double what a lot of modern adults eat in a day, and they needed all of it consistently, through winters where food was actively harder to find. So step one of winter survival wasn't really a clever invention at all. It was just having a body that evolution. Okay, so their bodies were already built for extreme cold. But some researchers think certain groups took this way further than just having a stocky build and a big appetite. Let's talk about the actual bones that started this entire hibernation debate. So this whole theory comes from a genuinely eerie site in northern Spain called Sima de los Huesos, which literally translates to pit of bones. It's a deep natural shaft that's been used as basically a mass grave for early Neanderthals and their ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years, and over the decades, researchers have pulled thousands of bones and teeth out of it, some dated to over 400,000 years old. In 2020, two researchers, Juan Luis Arzuaga and Antonis Bartziocas, published a paper looking closely at some of these bones and noticed something genuinely strange: lesions and damage patterns that closely resembled the kind of bone damage seen in animals that hibernate, caused by seasonal disruptions in bone growth tied to slowed metabolism. And here's the detail that makes this theory even creepier. The remains of actual hibernating cave bears were found in that exact same pit, which raises a genuinely wild possibility. What if this cave wasn't just a burial site, but a shared seasonal shelter, used by both hibernating bears and early humans attempting to survive winter using a similar biological strategy? The researchers' theory is that in this specific region, the harsh, arid winters simply didn't provide enough fat-rich food to keep these early humans functioning normally through the coldest stretches. So instead of just running on empty for months, their bodies may have shifted into some kind of drastically slowed metabolic state, essentially riding out the worst of winter in a prolonged, low-energy sleep. Okay, so that theory is genuinely fascinating, but I promised you the real debate, and here it is. A lot of other researchers are seriously not convinced, and their pushback is honestly pretty compelling too. So here's the central problem critics point to. True hibernation, the kind where an animal's core body temperature drops dramatically for months, generally only works for smaller-bodied mammals. Large, big-brained animals like Neanderthals and humans have brains that require a constant, significant supply of energy just to function, and dropping core body temperature that drastically for months at a time is a much harder biological trick to pull off at that body size and brain size. Even genuine hibernating bears don't actually hit true deep hibernation the way smaller animals do. They enter something closer to a lighter state called torpor, with less deep, more interrupted sleep, and they still burn through a significant amount of stored energy the whole time. So critics argue those same bone lesions Arzuaga and Bartziocas pointed to could just as easily be explained by something way less dramatic: chronic malnutrition, vitamin D deficiency, or other seasonal health stress from a genuinely brutal, food-scarce winter without needing to invoke actual hibernation at all. And here's a detail that really strengthens the skeptic's case. Modern populations who still survive extreme Arctic winters today, like the Inuit and Sami peoples, don't hibernate at all. Researchers studying these groups point out that a diet extremely high in fat from sources like fatty fish and reindeer provides enough sustained energy to stay fully active and alert through brutal winters without needing anything close to a hibernation-like state. So, where does this actually leave us? Genuinely unresolved. The hibernation theory is a real, published, seriously considered hypothesis, not some fringe internet claim. But it's also facing real, legitimate scientific pushback, and more evidence would be needed before most researchers in the field would fully accept it. It's one of those rare, genuinely open questions in human evolution where the honest answer is still, we're not sure yet. So, hibernation is still up for debate. But here's what we're actually confident ancient humans were doing to survive brutal winters, hibernation theory or not. And honestly, this part is just as impressive. So, regardless of where you land on the hibernation debate, researchers are much more confident about a handful of other strategies that clearly kept ancient humans alive through the worst winters. Fire obviously mattered enormously. For warmth, for cooking tough or frozen meat into something actually digestible, and for extending usable hours during the short, brutal days of a deep winter. Shelter mattered just as much. Natural caves when available, or constructed dwellings using materials like animal bones and hides when they weren't, creating genuinely effective insulated spaces to ride out the worst weather. And diet, especially fat intake, is probably the single most consistently important factor across basically every version of this survival story, whether we're talking about ancient Neanderthals or modern Arctic peoples today. High-fat foods provide dramatically more calories per bite than lean meat or plant matter, which matters enormously when you're burning through thousands of extra calories a day just to stay warm and functional. This is exactly why researchers point to that Inuit and Sami comparison so often. It's real, living proof that a genuinely brutal winter climate is survivable indefinitely, generation after generation, through the right combination of diet, shelter, fire, and cooperation, no hibernation required. And finally, cooperation tied every single one of these pieces together. Hunting large, calorie-dense animals, maintaining a fire through the night, sharing food during lean stretches. None of it worked as a solo effort. It required a genuinely coordinated group, pooling resources and effort, generation after generation, refining the exact same handful of strategies until they became reliable enough to survive winters that, on paper, should have been nearly impossible to live through. So here's the actual takeaway. We genuinely don't know for certain whether some ancient humans hibernated through the worst winters, and that's honestly one of the more exciting parts of this story. It's live, ongoing science, not a settled textbook fact. But what we do know for certain is that surviving deadly winters, hibernation or not, took an extraordinary combination of biological adaptation, fire, shelter, an intense relationship with dietary fat, and serious group cooperation, refined over hundreds of thousands of years. Whether or not your ancestors technically napped through winter like a bear, they were absolutely built, in every sense of the word, to survive conditions that would take out most of us in a single bad weekend. If nobody taught you the actual research behind this in school, follow. We cover ancient history and human origins like this every single week. Comment whether you buy the hibernation theory or you're firmly on Team Skeptic. Because honestly, the debate in our comments might be more interesting than the debate in the actual research papers. And if you want more of this same wait, science is still arguing about this energy, check out the Ice Age survival video linked right here. Completely different set of facts, same kind of genuinely unresolved mystery.